You're tuned into TobiTalks, episode 31. Let's talk about a real nurse of Bravo. Tanya Sam talks nursing, business, and tech startup. So many nurses are wondering, how can we get more involved in the technology scene? And to be honest, we already are involved in the technology scene. If you are working in any healthcare setting, period, as a nurse, you are involved in technology. I mean, think about it. The devices that we're using to take care of our patients, the systems that we're using to document their health records. Come on, man. We so versed in technology, we don't even know it. But let me tell you one thing. What I do know is that we need more advice on how we can really get in, especially if we have ideas that can help transform healthcare as a whole. My guest today is giving us all the gems on how to go from RN to getting inside the tech startup. I'm talking business, I'm talking coding, I'm talking everything. And what I love so much about her, not only is she smiling and giving us Tanya time on The Real Housewives of Atlanta, she really is behind the scenes hustling and bustling as a businesswoman, hitting it hard in technology. Y'all, I'm so excited about this conversation. I hope you got your pens, pads, scratch that. I hope you got this app downloaded so you don't have to use a pen and pad, because all the gems she's dropping, you're going to want to have it on speed dial. Okay? Let's go ahead and hop into this conversation. I am so excited to have you on TobiTalks. How are you?
Hi, Toby. Good. I'm happy to be here. Well, virtually here, I should say.
Girl, with technology, we can be everywhere. So I'm so excited to have you. So let's go ahead and just hop into this conversation. Girl, tell me, how did you get into nursing? And, what are you currently doing now?
Oh, wow. Okay, great question. And I always try to say long story short, but with me, I'm such a talker, it's always a long story.
Girl, I got you.
So try to be brief. But yeah, I actually come from a family that's always been really focused on healthcare, medicine, et cetera. My dad's a doctor. He came to Canada. My dad's Ghanaian. He came to Canada in 1960, one or two, on a med school scholarship. So yeah, he came directly from Ghana. He was one of the recipients of Kwame Nkrumah, who was sending these Ghanaians out into the world. So that's how he came to Canada, and he's been an OB-GYN in Toronto, for years. He just retired. He's 80 now.
What?
And he met my mom. Yeah, he's 80. He's old. My dad is old school. So yeah, he met my mom. She was a nurse. They met through friends. Little 5'2" white lady, English white lady from the UK, and she had come to Canada to nurse. Back at that time, it wasn't exactly travel nursing. They met in the early 70s, but yeah. So, and everyone around me was really I grew up in the type of family, with this African influence that was very much you have to be a doctor, you have to be a lawyer, you have to be
you only get
an
engineer, something with money.
Something with money. And, I completely appreciate it, because I really, truly grew up in the type of family where, especially with immigrant parents, they were all professional immigrants. So there was never a question of would you or would you not go to university of this. My dad's family back in Ghana were civil servants. My grandmother was a nurse, in England, way back in the day. So it was never a question in our family of what you would do. It was kind of which degree were you going to choose. So I assumed, and my older sister, my older brother went to law school. My sister, she decided to go to med school. And she was about 9 years older than me. So, I always looked up to her. But I was watching her go through med school. And I was like, man, this sucks. This just does not look fun, Yeah. And I went to McGill University to do my undergrad, and I did genetics and cell biology. So I started researching. This was guys, I'm kind of old. I'm 40.
Girl,
I was there.
Do not crack. You look 23. Keep going.
No, but I say the timing of it because it's kind of interesting to the story, because you think about the power of computing over those years. So I went into McGill, let me think, was it 97? And so when I was doing genetics, we didn't have, powerful iPhones in our pockets. We would be doing runs and tests, and it would take weeks to get we were sequencing a genome on it was very different. It was very different. And now we underestimate this little iPhone in in our pocket that does everything.
Click.
Yeah, it was very interesting. So I really, really loved it. I did a lot of research, but I also realized, once I finished that and I started researching and I was deciding, I was, writing the MCATs and doing all that. And I was like, I really don't want to go to med school. And I had a lot of really amazing people in my life, aunt and my sister as well, who were like, do nursing, like, just do it. And I was like, okay. So I did, I applied to U of T and I did one of their accelerated combined Bachelor of Science nursing programs for people who had already had a degree. So, and I loved it. Like, I really loved it. I thought I was going to be a pediatric nurse, and I really focused my whole time in nursing school, all my clinicals on peds. And then for my last final clinical, they were like, look, you've taken up all the ped spots. I'm putting you in something else. And I like fought and hollered. They're like, too bad. And I ended up in oncology. And I thought my life was going to be ruined because I was like, you are ruining my plan to greatness as a pediatric nurse. Right. And I ended up loving oncology. I never looked back. And yeah, that's where I started. I did a small stint in public health, but yeah, predominantly throughout my career, I've done oncology nursing.
So how was that impact for you? Because, I mean, obviously you went to school in Canada. So when you actually were doing nursing in the U.S., what was different? What differences did you see between the two different countries?
Oh, okay. Good question. I'll start with, for me especially, because the Canadian healthcare system is so different, right?
Yeah,
like we have this all-inclusive healthcare system. Mm-hmm. And then when I moved to New York, I was working on at Sloan Kettering and New York Presbyterian, which are amazing, amazing research facilities, and great city of New York. But it was the first time I really understood what it meant to have like all-inclusive healthcare. Like my patients would come and they would get a bill for Tylenol. Do you know how much Tylenol costs in the U.S. for an inpatient?
It's disrespectful.
It's like $28 for 2 tablets.
Mm-hmm. That's at least like 5 bottles at Walmart. Mm-hmm.
Yes, exactly. You see this and you're like, this makes no sense. Why am I paying? And that's like, and people wonder why your healthcare bills add up to $300,000 for like, a bone marrow, not even a bone marrow transplant. But so that was really interesting to me because, watching patients go through, bone marrow transplants, leukemia, lymphoma in Canada, where they didn't have the stress of going, oh my gosh, what if my insurance runs out? What if I can't pay for this? What if, and seeing like the bills roll in at your home in these thick envelopes. Wow. I think, I just really think that impacts your ability to heal and really process and fight a disease like that.
Yeah. Especially when you're taking care of patients that they're trying to focus on their care, but they're still focusing on, am I going to be able to afford this? So that puts you like in a really like tight situation as a nurse because you want them to focus on getting better, but they can't because they're dealing with the stress of financially paying for this when they are trying to get better. Wow. Did the care in itself change for you? Do you feel like there was any kind of differences in the care that you delivered versus, the situation that you're seeing patients go through, but the actual care delivery?
So I would say by the time, I moved to the U.S., I'm really horrible with numbers. It was probably 2006, 2007. Mm-hmm. And so, when I started there in New York, we were doing so for instance, when you would do a transplant, you would probably stay inpatient in hospital for, a month at least. We kept people, they were sending everybody home. So that to me was really shocking. They're like, yep, you're better off at home. We're going to do your chemo as outpatient. You're going to go home. You're going to come back. We were keeping people in isolation less, but we would definitely do, we would do most of our chemotherapy completely inpatient. So I think we were a little bit ahead. We were a little bit ahead in the U.S. in terms of, but I think that also factors into the economics of it. Yeah. Because if you have to keep a patient, inpatient for a month, or you can send them home, there's a huge cost savings there.
Yep. That's so true. Yeah. Wow.
Yeah.
So how long were you doing bedside before you transitioned into like full technology, or are you still balancing both right now?
I was bedside nursing for maybe 12 years. I just recently gave it up. when I moved to Atlanta, I got a job at Northside. I was working in their outpatient infusion clinic.
Mm-hmm.
And so I was kind of balancing a little bit of this. I'd started a company, my first company, and Paul was just starting a company. So we were kind of doing a little bit of everything. And that part was really hard for me because I actually still had a job back in New York. So I was doing per diem. You know how we do.
Girl, yes. We got about 7 jobs at the same time.
Yes. Yep. So that part was tough because, I was launching this company, and nursing is like all hands on deck. Like, you can't just go take a call, in the med room and like answer emails, like, especially on our floor. Like, we were just running all the time. So it got to the point where, I had to really decide if I could continue to do like my hours that required me to keep per diem and balance like this company that I was starting. I was helping Paul start a company. It was insane. It was good insane, but I loved it. So I would say total like 12, 13 years. It was fast.
Come on. Yes. And you know what's so funny? So I just recently watched the last episodes of The Real Housewives of Atlanta where I forgot her, Shamara, where she threw up on herself. And I saw you hop in there. I said, that's a nurse. Look at that nurse. Look at her go.
Oh my gosh. That was actually hilarious because, let's be fair. We were a little drinky that day. We're all having cocktails. But it just goes to show, like, we don't even blink. Like, we don't even blink. You blew. I was literally looking at her pupils because I was actually worried.
You were low-key assessing her and cleaning up. Like, hey, girl,
Absolutely.
We got you. Da-da-da-da-da. You're like, oh, it's okay. I was like, a nurse always stays calm in any situation where it's chaotic. And you, out of everyone in that whole situation, you were so, like, calm. And I was like, that is a nurse. Good God. Go ahead, Tanya. You better represent for us.
I totally was like, oh my God. But actually at the time I was genuinely a little concerned because she was, she was really like, I'm just going to sleep. Like, I'm done, guys. So it was funny.
Well, let me go ahead and I want to throw that out there and say shout out to you for being an awesome nurse and representing for us. But hopping back in the conversation, I actually wanted to talk more about the whole transition of starting your company and actually diving into technology. So even for me, I, had my experience working as a pediatric nurse, then mother, baby, NICU, and then I transitioned into administration. And then now,
oh, wow.
Girl, yeah, that's what I'm still saying. Like, wow, how'd I get here? But and it's we don't really see a lot of women of color like us, a lot of millennials, and women just in general in the administration world. But now with my podcast and really trying to get more involved into the technology conference and showcasing things that are happening in healthcare, I don't see a lot of us women of color in that space. So I was so drawn to you, seeing like, wow, as a nurse, you are also so involved in technology. How did that come about? Like, how did you know, like, wow, or where did you make that shift into saying, I want to know more about technology before you even got to the part of launching your own business?
I had to give a lot of credit to, I didn't have a huge introduction, to be honest, with technology, like in my family. And which is also, I think, one of the big reasons I went on the show because, I really came from a background that was very educated, but, it was like, hey, here's only 4 things. So I only saw like 4 choices of what we should be. They were darn good choices. Don't get me wrong. But, it's interesting because you even said, okay, go into engineering. For some reason in my like family group and peers and my parents' peers, there weren't too many female engineers. So nobody was saying, hey, go do computer science or anything like that. I had male cousins who were civil engineers. Yeah, but nobody told me that. So, when I come back to thinking, people always ask me, why do you do the show? I mean, this was a big deal for me because I do feel like, the future is technology. And I wanted to be able to portray, to other women and people of color that there is a future for them in tech. But if you don't see it anywhere else, why would you even dream that up,
Exactly. Wow.
Yeah. So that was kind of, I think, one of the big reasons why I went on the show. But for me, I found mentors in really interesting places. And one of them happened to be like my partner and now fiance. My sister, just before this, when I had just started when I'd actually spent a bunch of time in Ghana. I was just about to move to Ghana, and my sister got involved because she's an MD as well with this early stage electronic medical records company. So this was right around the time when, everyone was doing it. And I was like, what's that? Huh? I don't really know. But she was kind of messing around with that. And so we were starting to talk about this. I was like, this is really interesting. And then I actually started dating Paul.
Mm-hmm.
And I say this because, I think for women, even for me, people are always saying, like, can you mentor me? Can you mentor me? There's nobody that looks like me. And I believe that fully. There's not a lot of people
true.
in technology that probably look like you. And I think so even more than that, I tell people, look, you got to find a mentor where you can, and probably they won't look like you. So mine happens to be a male,
mm-hmm.
And we actually started off like completely romantically dating. But if you ever date an entrepreneur or a founder, like there's no division of church and state. There just isn't, because it's so all encompassing.
Yeah.
So he was building his that was probably his third cybersecurity company. And probably on our second date, he said, can we take a detour? And he had to meet with his co-founder. So I was sitting there at the table listening to them talk, and I was just enthralled. I was like, wow, you guys are going to do what? With your PhD research, blah, blah. And I was just like, wow. And, I just nerded out, and it was super cool. I think some people would be like, man, this date sucks. But I was like, whoa, this is kind of cool.
Mm-hmm.
And so he was very instrumental in kind of helping me get over my fear, because, I think a lot of women have this as well. A lot of, people who are trying to make a career shift from something they're traditionally used to. Because I kept saying, he'd be like, hey, listen, BJ and I are working on this part of, I think this was an early stage company. Can you help us do this? And I kept saying, like, no, I don't know how to do that. I don't know how to do that. You guys have PhDs. You guys are more experienced. Yeah. And he would just look me in the eye. He'll be like, you'll figure it out.
Which is so true.
You'll figure it out.
Wow.
And I think there's such a lesson in that, because, fear is the thing that holds you back,
mm-hmm.
fear and failure. And they are so, like, those are the devils that will hold you back, because if you don't try, you'll never know. And it sounds so cliche, but it is so true when you get to the other side, and it's so much more fulfilling, because you're like, darn, I tried it and it worked, or darn, I tried it and it didn't work, but I learned so much from it, and I'm going to get it right the next time. And it's informed my business or whatever you're trying to work on.
Mm-hmm.
So that's really how I got into technology. So I started.
Come on. I'm about to pass around a collection plate with all this truth you've given. Yes.
But,
so much truth.
It's so unlikely. And, the things that I look back in my life, like, they're the ones that you probably didn't plan, or, you resisted because you were afraid, but they just push you into something so great and so different.
And aren't you really happy that even happened? Like, and it's funny because your story almost like sounds like mine. That's like literally how I started getting involved with technology, because my fiance
mm-hmm.
at that time, he's huge in tech, and he was living in Canada, ironically enough.
Oh, really?
And yes. And when we got married, he relocated here, but I never had interest in tech, because I always thought, like, oh my God, a lot of codes and numbers, blah, blah, blah. And now it's like, all of a sudden I've started a podcast, and I'm using technology, even in nursing. I'm building like codes on how to like properly do forms
mm-hmm.
and audits when I'm doing inspections. And I didn't realize how much technology was entwined in our nursing career.
Yeah.
And you're right. You can't be scared. You literally just have to figure it out. And this whole year, I've been figuring out technology and just realizing, like, wow, we as nurses need to be so much more involved in this transition, because healthcare is transforming so quickly. And it's like, my fear is like nurses are going to get left out, because there's so many different products, and there's so many different development, and there's so many different things that could help us. And I think that's what just kind of like blew my mind to even you, like, I'm like, I have to applaud you. Thank you for using a TV show, a reality show, to really be that foundation of actually getting to talk about it, and showcasing that aspect, because I do not see a lot of women of color or in diversity in the tech world. You see a lot of predominantly white males, so to see an African-American male, to see a woman who's not just in technology, but also in healthcare, making that stance, it's a really big deal,
Yeah. And I mean, that to me is the show was one thing, and I feel like it it's I mean, it's just an interesting platform because the reach is very broad, and I've had so many people. I mean, that is probably one of the biggest gifts of everything, that reach out to me, that are women, that are nurses. Like, I love, like, nurses are a crew. Let me tell
Yes.
you, like,
Come
we are,
on.
and that is like the one thing I do feel like when people always ask me, "Oh, do you miss nursing?" I absolutely miss bedside nursing. I miss my patients, but I miss my nurse crew, right? It is like we are soldiers. We go through the trenches together. You go into the med room knowing you can complain to someone and they got you. Like,
We eat
I mean, I just
together.
worked with
We
such,
do everything. You
yeah.
got my back. It truly is like a tribe, our nurse tribe.
No, it is a tribe. And so that's been really great, having so many reach out and being like, hey, how did you do this? Because it's also really tough. Like, the burnout is real. So we look for ways to, like, gosh, if I can't, do this forever, is there something else that I can do?
Yes.
And I think, we thought for a long time, I think people just in general, people thought that technology and being in startups and that sort of entrepreneurship was reserved for only people who were technical and knew how to code, this like geeky type, and I just think there's places for so much more, because you have a special knowledge base, right? You understand patient side, you understand interactions between doctors, medicines, this, and you can apply that to any piece of technology. It doesn't mean you necessarily have to be the one to code it, although I do tell people that's major and to try and pursue pieces of that. But there's so many ways you can use technology to enable your practice.
Yes.
And it's just kind of like, all those pain points that we complain about every day. Like, why don't we have this? And, someone comes up with it.
That's exactly true. And that's actually why, like, obviously I started this platform for my nurses who are like burnt out, who don't know that there's so many other professions they can go into. So I interview different women and men who are in different positions in nursing, whether you're at the bedside or you're at a tech company, these are different apps, platforms you can go into. But the thing that I'm seeing so much that I really want to make a bigger impact in is a lot of these health technology conferences. You don't see any nurses, very few. And then you have all these nurses with amazing startup ideas or amazing development ideas, creating apps, creating different technologies. And it's like, these are what needs to be showcased, because nurses, yes, we're at the bedside and we have that patient interaction, but we also know the different things that would work, and giving us a voice to actually showcase that. So for you, when you actually, started getting a little involved in it and started learning and researching on your own, what kind of research or abilities did you strengthen yourself on to really start getting more involved in technology?
Ooh, okay. So my best advice is, and people always ask, like, how do you make the transition? Sometimes it doesn't have to be that you have to jump into a coding school or a coding program right off the bat, although I think that is imperative. There's so many resources online right now where people can take introductory coding, learn to code, learn to think like a coder, and that sort of thought process. A good one I know is Code Academy.
Oh,
so
yeah,
there is that.
Academy.
Yep. And just dabble around in it, Number one, I also think if you have kids, I tell every parent, and I'm sure there's tons of parents out there listening, your kid should absolutely take a coding class. So if your school doesn't have it, you should sit them down online and make it mandatory to do, because when I tell you, your child in this generation will literally be 10 steps behind if they don't have some semblance of understanding coding. Like, that is the biggest gap that we will, if you don't have your kids. So that's number one. But then for other people who are looking to start businesses and they're not technical, I really feel like you have to engross yourself in the startup ecosystem in your town, city, whatever it is. And which is kind of why, we started Tech Square Labs. So we opened Tech Square Labs about 4 years ago. We bought a building right in the heart of Georgia Tech, because there wasn't actually around that time, it was about 5 years now. 4 years. And there wasn't a lot of places where early stage entrepreneurs could go. Atlanta's had some great hits. Like, Paul's been very fortunate. We've had some big companies, and there's 300 people there. But if you're just two people on a laptop, we didn't have it, that the ecosystem was as deep at that time. And that, I think, was really major, because, you walk into a Starbucks nowadays, you walk into all these places where everyone's working on your laptop, but, the guy beside you is watching Star Wars streaming,
Yeah.
and you should be sitting down beside someone who you could turn to and be like, listen, I'm working on my go-to-market. Does this sound crazy? Blah, blah,
Yeah.
blah. I want to ask you, like, what's a P&L? Like, does this investor deck look like you want people who speak your language, and you
Yeah.
need to learn that language. And where better to learn it in co-working places, in startup systems, startup ecosystems, going to meetups. Like,
Huge.
it is a
Huge.
process. And exactly. And I think you really need to like put yourself in that ecosystem, and it involves networking because, and Toby, like I told you, tell me if I talk too much, cut in on me, girl.
Oh, honey, you were good. What you mean? Girl, I'm sitting here with my tea. Like, come on. Yes. Give me the gems. This is the gems we need.
Yeah. I want people to like understand, because they're like, hey, I've got this idea, but I'm not technical. Can you help me find some technical? That's like me asking a perfect stranger, like, hey, can you give me someone to blind date? Like, it's like that.
Yeah.
Like, I don't know you well enough to say you should get married and build a company that'll probably take you 7 years to get to, who you should go and marry. Like, that's a lot. It takes time to find a co-founder. And what better way than to like be at an event, networking, and be like, oh my gosh, I'm working on this really great idea. And someone goes, wow, actually, that's kind of interesting. Let me think about that. And I think those are some of the things that go a long way. And how you meet people, and you keep coming back, and then one day someone's going to be like, oh, they'll start recommending you for something amazing because they know you.
Wow. So for a nurse who is wanting to step into this background, and what you just said was 100% completely true. In the year plus that I've been doing this, like I've literally, if it wasn't based off of the networking and the connections, like just a few months ago, I was able to launch an app just from my podcast that helps the nurses. Actually, if you ain't got time to listen to the whole thing, but you want to know what I talked about, you can click directly to the link, or you can go directly to a definition. And that was based off of networking with two guys who can develop an app. Like I had no idea how to do it, but they did, and they believed in it. So from your perspective, if a nurse is trying to step into this realm of technology, maybe they have a great idea, or maybe they want to learn more. What are a few ways to get involved into, like you said, local networking events? Do they need to, obviously for me, I go to Google for everything, obviously, but Google. Is there certain, Google, is there certain things that they should be keeping in mind at the networking events? Like, is it something they should learn how to come up to someone with networking, like, hey, I have this idea, or how should they kind of package themselves when they are trying to network? Because coming from a nursing world is different than technology. So different.
So I feel like in general, obviously nurses, for the most part, we're pretty outgoing. Like we're used to striking up conversations. So getting over the fear that, that imposter syndrome that you're in a room and everyone's going to be like, why is that nurse here? Like put that aside and just walk in like the boss that you are, knowing that like, if anyone dies here, I can save their life. Okay.
Damn
so right there, you've got like your big girl pants on. Because that's major, right? But introductions are really key. And I think that, choosing the events you want to go to, anything like once you've researched and understood whatever city you live in, where are the startup events? Where are the pitch competitions? Who's running the incubators? Who's running the accelerators? So, doing a little bit of Google research there, meetup.com. I don't even know if anyone uses that, but or knows about it, because meetups literally you can, you put in your city and it'll be like coders unite, tech people. Hey, I'm building a business. Start going to those things because they're really useful for meeting people. And then in terms of like how to meet people, a lot of those organizations will have like pitch night, and people always go, okay, I'll say two things about this. Oftentimes early stage or new entrepreneurs are so protective of their idea. They're like, I don't want to go to a pitch night because, I'm still trying to figure out how I'm going to build my company or my business. Someone's going to steal it. So I get this question a lot. They're like, I want people to sign NDAs. Like a lot of times people will approach me and they'll be like, I'd love to pick your brain, but please sign this NDA first. I at this point right now, I can't do that because, I do a lot of investing. I see a lot of companies. So, I mean, chances are I've seen that company 3 times. So last week, because it's just, unless you are working on something so technical and so far into the future that like it's going to be patented and change the world and no one's ever seen it, it's more likely that your idea is probably out there, but it's how you are going to build it that's going to be different in your market, your this, et cetera. So stand up at a pitch night and talk with passion about your idea so that someone comes up to you after and goes, you know what, that is really interesting. I'd like to talk more about it with you. And ask them in your pitches, be like, look, oftentimes people think when they go to these pitch nights that you need to ask for money or this. Sometimes the ask is, I'm looking for someone like a co-founder. I'm looking for a technical co-founder. I'm looking for someone to help me like build out sales. Ask for the partnerships that you need. And that like opens the door for people to come up and start talking to you about it.
Come on, Tanya, can you have a pitch night? All this advice is so deep. Oh.
I do have a pitch night. We have one every quarter, actually. We do, it's called it's in Atlanta. It's called the Atlanta Startup Battle. The next one is April 23rd. And actually we just extended applications. If someone's really dying to apply, they know where they can find me. I'm Tanya at Tech Square. But April 23rd is a $100,000 pitch competition. So it's one of the biggest in the Southeast. We've given away probably about $800,000 since we started Atlanta Startup Battle. It's pretty major. We've had over 450 applications for this round, and we pick the top 20 who go through a full, pretty rigorous mentoring day, and then we narrow it down to the top 5 that pitch on stage for $100,000 in front of over 1,000 people.
Yes.
It's major.
I'm so glad I did that. I actually did that on purpose. I knew about your pitch idea, but I wanted you to pick your own pitch idea. So I was like, come on. Tell me about the one that's coming up April 23rd. Come on.
Yeah. So people I really want you to apply.
That's awesome. Yes, that is so good. So what would they be expecting at this pitch night? Like what kind of also not only just pitching your idea, but like what other things happen at this pitch night you guys are going to do on April 23rd?
So, I mean, there's kind of two sides of it. The people who are applying to compete and then the people who are attending. So people that apply to compete, you go through the application. It's on our website, which is atlantastartupbattle.com. Finish the application, because if you can't finish those questions, you need to really sit down and dig deep to answer those questions to get past, I mean, we ask you some, it's not that hard, but so then secondly, we do a part where we do the mentorship day, where we break everybody up, the top 15 teams, into about 5 different modules, like product market fit, customer discovery, fundraising, UI, UX, and there's probably a couple more that I'm forgetting. And it's like speed dating with really seasoned mentors in the community that really help you, hone in and narrow down those parts of your business. So by the time we pick the top 5 that are on stage, you've got a really strong pitch. We help you. We tear those decks down and we rebuild them. So once you go on stage, it's incredible. And then the day consists of, we bring in 5 judges from all across the country, the Valley, Boston, New York, Atlanta, and they're the judges that basically judge the pitches in front of 100,000 people in the Atlanta community. And I think there's so much magic in that, because you're in a room full of people who are obviously interested in technology, interested in startups. We make it so that it's a networking event. We have an open bar. We have a DJ on top. So you're meeting people in a social scene. It's not just like, hey, tell me about your work. And I think that's where the magic and collisions of, networking happen.
And I think that's amazing. And I'm like, how long have you guys been doing this? Because this is truly what a lot of the grassroots local communities need. Sometimes people think you have to go big or go home or make it to, Southwest by Southwest, the conferences before you can ever be heard. But truly your local grassroots is where you can really get that support that you need.
Yeah. And I mean, I think this is really what we were trying to do with Tech Square, because I think that there's a funnel of really how we can help grow the startup culture. And it's the early stage entrepreneur. And you know what? For the most part, when you watch that Facebook movie, it's 90 minutes and you basically Mark Zuckerberg at 23 come up with an idea and 90 minutes later he's a billionaire. That's just not how it is. It's the slow and unseen steps from the beginning of okay, well, I've got this problem. I'm going to put it on a whiteboard. Who am I going to tell about it? How am I going to raise some money? Where am I going to build this out once I have 5 and 6 people? It's a long time. And for most people, it's not a home run on their first company, right? I think some of the best entrepreneurs our, like our audience today, which is nurses.
Yeah.
You have direct experience at something and knowledge about a problem, something that you want to solve, something that is a pain point to you. And you have to like take that experience and build it into a company. And then you need to add people on top of it that can help you with operations and business development. Like it's such a process and it's such a living, breathing thing that you really need people around you that can help you do that. But where do you find them? So find your people, find your tribe.
Girl, thank you for that. Because sometimes people only see the win, but they don't see the challenges to get to the win.
Yep.
You know what I mean? So of course
Yep.
people see you now like, oh yeah, she has it all. She's on TV. She's doing all this stuff. But it's like, there was a backstory behind that. There's a constant
Girl, let's talk about
evolve. That. Yes, please, let's do. Because that really, for me, is big.
I think that is also a huge thing because, it is hard when people think, oh man, I want to be an entrepreneur because the life is fabulous. Like there is so much behind the scenes, angst and this and being an entrepreneur, being a CEO in general. So
Yes.
I started a company called Limitless Smart Shot. And, it was part of, it came out of, I think, the fact that I had a medical background because I would come to work, I'd be with all my friends and we'd be drinking coffee for these 12-hour shifts when, we would really be relying on coffee to make us smarter, sharper, and this. And I'd be like, why isn't there some sort of natural dietary supplement that could help boost my brain performance when I'm on the job? Like, football players have Gatorade. Like, I use my brain to be smart. And so I wanted to create a dietary supplement beverage that would help do that. So I said, this is a great idea. Let me do this. And, I started it by myself. And it's lonely. It's so lonely. It's so hard. Once you even get people around you, they're looking at you like, okay, boss, what's next? Or, what's happening? Are we alive today? What's going on? What's going on? And, it's not easy. It is not easy at all, which is why I believe so much because, nursing is not easy. So nurse entrepreneurs, to me, I just feel like we have such strength already that we've proven that I love to bet on them.
Yes. And it's true though. And thank you for sharing that because I think a lot of people don't see that. They think that it's all, the travel, the lifestyle, but it's like, you have no idea how many nights you stay up, trying to figure out something, being able to travel from one coast to another coast, you're losing sleep, time with family, but you have something that is going to help impact so many other people. And that passion is what keeps you going. Even when it's lonely, even when it's hard, even when it's like, oh, this isn't the cutest Instagram picture I'm gonna post, but it's real.
Yep.
This is me, all the edges out, no eyebrows, bam, take it.
Exactly.
And I thank you for sharing that. So how are you also, because I know, girl, you not only being a nurse and not only being on reality TV, but you are a boss in so many other areas. So I know you're also a part of a wonderful organization that you're also helping, small businesses, especially for minority and female founders. Can you tell me more about that and like how you even got into that aspect as well?
So I think you're talking about Ascend 2020, which is, it is super fantastic. So Tech Square, Morehouse, and JP Morgan Chase, we came together to launch this Ascend 2020 initiative. And basically all of us were like, how can we really increase small businesses and entrepreneurship directly in like Atlanta? So this is our second cohort. We have 30 entrepreneurs who are working on business building, ideally with a technology focus or technology enabled. So that's kind of a broad definition, but that's how I feel, technology is really moving the needle these days anyway. So it's a 6-month accelerator program. We hold most of our classes, for about 5 hours on Monday evenings every week. And we cover the broad spectrum of teaching, these early stage entrepreneurs, everything from like finances, financial modeling, customer discovery is super huge, your business model, launching a business, how to get access to capital, how to pitch. Like we go through the whole gamut because, I think one of the biggest hurdle that most, early stage entrepreneurs is like, there's no business. They're not, it's not like, hey, I've got 3 years to go to do an MBA so I can learn how to build a startup.
Yes.
Like, how can we learn this in an accelerated way so I can get to work building my business?
Yeah.
So it's an incredible program. We've had some great companies come out of it. Pseudo was in our first cohort. There is an African-American founder. He does logistics and in the trucking industry. I think they've raised over, I don't know how much they've closed, but tens of millions for sure. Who else was in there? I think that's one of our biggest. Now Returns is another African-American female, and she's kind of combating the returns industry and the logistics between how many stores are getting returns and how we can, convert those returns to value. And just amazing things that, she was in retail for years, and she was like, this drives me crazy.
Wow.
And she went after that market.
Are you seeing a lot of more nurses come out into this market as well, entrepreneur and, founding organizations? Are you seeing a lot of that, or you feel like that's an area that we definitely can really, really embark on and really, show more of a face in?
Oh, for sure. So let me see, where do I start with this? I mean, without question, I think that there is so many opportunities and angles. And I think more than anything, how I would answer this is like, really, you have to chase something that you have your passion for. And I think that's like the best answer to that question. Like, follow what your passion is, follow what your background is, and know that like whatever you go after, you have to have some sort of secret sauce that you're adding to it, despite what profession you're coming from, because there's something inherent to you that can inform your business in a way that no one else can.
That's very true. Girl, come on. Do you have like a sticky note with all this advice? You just got them ready. You got them ready. That's amazing.
No, not at all. But awesome. I mean, this is this especially this podcast is like totally speaks to my passion. It's like nursing, entrepreneurship. It's really who I am. So it's easy. It's easy to like say the things that come out of my mouth,
Because you're authentic in it, and that's truly your passion, just like you've been stating all along. Girl, look, the next time I'm in Atlanta, we're going to have to like sit down, and of
Please,
course,
absolutely.
Look, I'm going to have you taste my Nigerian jollof rice so you can agree that ours is the best. And
I will never agree to that. It is total Ghanaian blasphemy. Because we know who makes the best jollof rice.
We do.
Sure.
We'll take it. Green, white, and green forever. Okay. So
Black stars.
As I wrap up our conversation, which has been amazing, I want you to, just give us some advice, especially some of our nurses out there that, are really trying to, maneuver their way into the technology field. They don't know where to start. Or my nurses out there who are burnt out and want to give up on their nursing career and not knowing that, hey, I can actually use this in other careers as well. Or even for my nursing students who are like coming up and not knowing that there's so many opportunities in the nursing field and healthcare and in technology they can go into. What kind of advice can you just give these different audience who are listening encouragement to keep pushing, especially coming from a nurse herself?
Oh, so first of all, I will say I loved bedside nursing. Like, I really, really loved it. I miss it. It's funny because, sometimes I make the joke where I say I traded up one type of an adrenaline that involved the blood and guts and poop for a different type of startup adrenaline. But there's something that is so special about nursing. We always call it a very thankless job, but sometimes you look back and you realize like how much thanks you had in that job, because you'll go to another job and there's no place where you can go into a med room and have a cry and someone walk in and be like, are you okay, sis? Are you okay, girl? Because that does not happen in the regular office
At
place.
all.
So those are the small things that you just really need to not take for granted. Now, if you're not working on a floor where you have that type of camaraderie, like, go find it. Sometimes that's hard too. But I just feel like I was really blessed. I worked with great people. And when I didn't, I switched jobs. But so I will say that those that are in nursing school is tough. Like, nursing school is very, very tough. It gets tougher and tougher now because you've got clinicals. And, I think we're at a specific time in the point of nursing where, especially even when I started, everyone's talking about the professionalization of nursing. And I find that people like bedside nursing really gets a little poo-pooed and looked down upon.
Yeah.
I really just hold our nurses up on like such a pedestal because we are just incredible. Like we really save lives every day, and like without us, like everyone would be dead. That's how it goes.
That's right.
So I commend you, but I also think like one of the greatest things about nursing is the portability, and shift work is a gift because you have, days on and days off where you can focus on building a business entirely, whereas the rest of the world goes to work from, 9 to 5, goes home to their kids, and then has 2 days on the weekend. But you've got this, like, if you are doing shift work, these chunks of time that you can dedicate to something else, that is incredible. That is really a gift there. So just think about stuff that drives you crazy, that you would like to see changed in the world.
I hope you've enjoyed today's podcast episode. There were so many gems dropped. But let's be honest, who got time to replay, pause, and write down all that information shared? Shoo, I know I don't. But don't worry, I got you. Download TobiTalks app on Google Play for nursing resources, definitions, and so much more that were mentioned on today's episode. TobiTalk app features show notes that timelines the conversation and lets you click directly to the resource or definition. And it even lets you bookmark the gem for later. Listen, we're too busy learning how to save lives or even saving lives as nurses to deal with a replay button. TobiTalk app is your one-stop shop for podcast episodes and show notes. For more on TobiTalks, like the blogs and videos, go to my website at www.TobiTalks.com. And I love to hear from you guys, so feel free to slide into my DMs on IG or Facebook and hit me up through email. That's TobiTalks@TobiTalks.com. Again, that's TobiTalks@TobiTalks.com. Till next time, I'll be talking to you soon.